From the very beginning, the live-action Snow White remake looked like it was skating on thin ice. It had all the makings of either a groundbreaking revival or a complete train wreck. And now, it's clear which direction it took.
The movie that nobody wanted to see, and I mean that seriously, nobody wants to see this movie. Ticket pre-sales are nowhere near what Disney was hoping for. Let's just say if you wanted to buy tickets for the 9 p.m. show tonight, wherever you are in America, you'd be just fine.
Disney, known for milking its golden age animated treasures for modern-day hits, hoped this latest project would tap into that magical blend of nostalgia and fresh flair. But the second those behind-the-scenes whispers started leaking out, fans got suspicious. Something felt off.
Now, for Disney, as you probably remember, all of this publicity, the Zegler interviews, the Daily Mail leak, caused a lot of unexpected, for them anyway, pre-production problems. People weren't supposed to see and understand just how unwatchable the new Snow White was going to be. It was supposed to be, kind of a surprise, but now there was no hiding.
They noticed the film was straying way too far from the 1937 classic that defined generations. Instead of feeling excited, people got worried. The charm and innocence of the original seemed to be tossed aside in favor of something unrecognizable.
Now, for Disney, as you probably remember, all of this publicity, the Zegler interviews, the Daily Mail leak, caused a lot of unexpected, for them anyway, pre-production problems. People weren't supposed to see and understand just how unwatchable the new Snow White was going to be. It was supposed to be, kind of a surprise, but now there was no hiding.
And when the movie finally hit theaters, those early concerns, totally justified. It flopped hard. Critics were brutal. Fans were louder. The reviews weren't just bad, they were scathing.
It had the lowest opening, under 50 million, of any of these live-action Disney remakes that they've ever had.
This disaster dropped right into Bob Iger's lap. He had just returned as Disney's CEO, only to walk into chaos. Theme park attendance was slipping, Disney Plus was bleeding money, and now one of the studio's most iconic reboots was blowing up in real time.
But these guys at Disney, they're not that bright, they're not that smart, and we see that because they can't come up with any new IP.
With big stars like Rachel Zegler and Gal Gadot headlining, Disney had bet big. They wanted to repackage the magic. What they got was a headline-grabbing flop. The internet wasted no time labeling Snow White a box office catastrophe.
So now, as the movie comes out, the two biggest stars in this movie can't stand each other to the point where they can't be in the same room, which forced Disney, in their infinite wisdom, to cut back on doing a formal premiere.
And let's talk about that backlash, because wow, fans couldn't believe how far the story had been bent out of shape. Characters were totally reworked, the plot felt distant, and Snow White? She barely resembled the gentle, kind-hearted character fans had adored for nearly a century.
The latest victim of really bad ideas is finally here. The magical Disney DEI woke equity version of the 1937 classic Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs. But because the word dwarves is now apparently controversial, Disney took that part out of the movie altogether. And now the movie is just called Snow White, which would be like Disney taking lions out of Lion King, or mermaids out of The Little Mermaid.
While some moviegoers appreciate bold new takes, this one felt like it bulldozed the fairy tale. The dwarfs were different, the setting was unfamiliar, and Snow White's vibe was jarringly modern. Too many people walked away feeling like their childhood had just been rewritten without consent.
You said you were bringing a modern edge to it on stage. What do you mean by that?
I just mean that it's no longer 1937, and we absolutely wrote a Snow White that is
not going to be saved by the prince.
She's not going to be saved by the prince, and she's not going to be dreaming about true love. She's dreaming about becoming the leader she knows she can be, and the leader that her late father told her that she could be if she was fearless, fair, brave, and true.
The technical side didn't help either. Critics slammed the direction, said the cinematography was flat, and the movie didn't even seem sure of what it wanted to be. And right in the center of all that chaos, Rachel Zegler.
I know this point has been made, but this truly is the worst casting, maybe, in the history of the film industry.
Rachel had already made a name for herself before Snow White, but this role brought a new kind of heat, and not the good kind. Suddenly, she was the face of the disaster. And that kind of spotlight, it burns. Word on the street? Disney started quietly scrubbing her name from future projects. Insiders claimed she was pulled from Toy Story 5, where she had allegedly signed on under the codename Spiral. And that wasn't all. Remember the rumored reboot of Pirates of the Caribbean? Yep, apparently she was involved at one point, then suddenly dropped. And though that film has had its fair share of production headaches, Zegler's exit turned heads and sent online speculation into overdrive.
Disney is having its own problems. They're finally releasing the latest adaptation of Snow White, but they're scaling back the Hollywood premiere of the film. Kinsey, why is that?
Because Rachel Zegler is a PR nightmare.
She's a PR nightmare. I don't know how anyone would hire her.
As if that wasn't enough drama, Zegler herself started fanning the flames. During the actors' strike, she said something that really rubbed people the wrong way, that actors should be paid every time someone streams a movie on Disney+.
I say, if I'm going to stand there 18 hours in a dress of an iconic Disney princess, I deserve to be paid for every hour that it is streamed on.
Now, sure, the industry does need to rethink compensation in the streaming era, but Zegler's take came off as tone-deaf, even entitled, especially to those who've worked decades without ever dreaming of such a demand.
No one on the right side of America can stand the star of this movie.
But you don't seemingly like your own character, so she comes off as an insufferable, whiny brat.
Well, then came her comments about wearing the Snow White costume for 16 to 18 hours a day. Yeah, it's tough, but anyone in the biz will tell you that's par for the course. Instead of gaining sympathy, it made her seem like she didn't quite understand the grind, despite already starring in major roles.
This is someone who is as entitled as, I don't need your business.
And if you disagree with this sentiment, I don't need your business. Thanks.
You know what? Maybe Disney does. Maybe you're a tool, you're a pawn in this film. You didn't write it, you didn't direct it, you have nothing to do with the creation of Snow White. Right. You should shut up and do the job.
But what really sparked fury? Her early praise for the film came with what felt like a dig at the original. She called her version of Snow White the best and bravest interpretation yet. Oof, that did not sit well with fans who view the 1937 version as sacred Disney royalty.
Rachel is literally the star of a Disney movie, and she acts like she's some sort of victim, and that's the sort of mentality that is just poisoning people's minds. Like, she acts like her life is so bad.
I truly do believe that. There's something wrong with her. She's disturbed, she's unhappy, and she thinks it's about feminism and the patriarchy and about abortion, but the reality is she's just not stable, like the majority of people in Hollywood. They're just not stable human beings.
People accused her of disrespecting the very legacy she was stepping into. Even other versions, like the gritty Kristen Stewart film or the whimsical Mirror Mirror with Lily Collins, got thrown into the mix as more respectful interpretations. Zegler, meanwhile, looked like she only cared about her take. Behind the scenes, things got even messier. Whispers started circulating. Was she being blacklisted? Not just by Disney, but by other studios too? Word was, Blumhouse Productions dropped her from a planned horror trilogy. Then came murmurs that Warner Bros. Had yanked her from a political thriller she'd been cast in.
Sweetie, you're being paid $25 million and you're on TV saying your bosses suck. So Rachel Zegler, maybe keep your mouth shut.
Now, projects fall apart all the time. Budgets shift, creative visions change. But this many removals in such a short time? It painted a picture that was hard to ignore. Studios seem to view Zegler as risky.
I don't really care what happens with this movie. I really hope her career is pretty much over. I'd be thrilled to see that. I can't imagine. I mean, Christian, you tell me. But is she not seen as box office poison now because of all of her antics?
It's kind of a mixed track record. She's still fairly young. Her West Side Story debut was not a hit, and that was a Spielberg movie, so that was kind of surprised. But if you're a studio, if you're a director, if you're a casting director, you've got to think twice or three times before hiring her. Listen, she's talented, she's attractive, she's got skill, but there are a lot of actresses in Hollywood who bring all that to the table and are not going to absolutely sabotage your work. She was plucked out of obscurity by Steven Spielberg. All you say is thank you, Mr. Spielberg, and you keep saying that for the next 50 years.
YouTubers and commentators had a field day, lumping her in with Hollywood figures like Alec Baldwin, George Clooney, and Meghan Markle, stars who'd all faced public backlash for speaking out too boldly or stepping on the wrong toes. But unlike them, Rachel was still new to the game, and she didn't have the decades of goodwill to fall back on. Meanwhile, Bob Iger was juggling flaming swords. Disney's identity was being questioned. Fans wondered if the studio even cared about its legacy anymore, and Snow White had become the epicenter of that storm.
But these guys at Disney, they're not that bright, they're not that smart, and we see that because they can't come up with any new IP. Why not write some new movies? You guys sit around, you have billions of dollars, they keep going back and rewriting the classic.
Even though Iger tried to reassure everyone that the film had depth and would eventually win hearts, audiences weren't buying it. Rachel hyped it up on social media as the #1 movie in the world, but people were quick to fact-check her with box office receipts that told a very different story. The marketing didn't help either. Disney's promos tried to be funny, lighthearted, and sweet, but viewers weren't having it. One awkward TV spot showed Dopey saying people were rushing to theaters, while the dwarfs shuffled forward like they were being dragged. It was painful.
Disney, despite losing over $1 billion on their last 4 movies, as they continue to shove woke politics into people's faces who just want to go to the movie, laugh, cry, and go home. Look, people don't want to be lectured when they're watching a movie, and they certainly don't want to be told that they're bad people. But that's what Disney continues to do.
Disney, the king of polished image control, looked lost. Their usually airtight brand now felt shaky, vulnerable, even tone-deaf. People were saying Disney was too focused on messaging and not enough on actual storytelling. Casting felt strategic instead of soulful, and fans? They were hurt. Rachel Zegler, instead of reading the room, doubled down. She kept praising the film, kept calling it bold, but instead of winning over hearts, her confidence turned people off. It felt dismissive, like she was trying to replace the past rather than build on it.
Now, one thing that is already universally known at this point by the general public is the fact that Disney is in full-on damage control mode.
The reason we had Rachel Zegler on the docket is she's an asshole.
Rachel Zegler is extraordinarily woke, but she's woke in a way that's quite deranged.
For lifelong fans, that was personal. Many felt like the emotional connection they had with the original film was being trampled on. The reimagining wasn't honoring the legacy, it was replacing it. And Zegler's attitude? It just made that sting worse. And perhaps the most heartbreaking part of it all? The speed with which everything unraveled. Rachel Zegler had been on the rise. People saw her as the next big thing. But Snow White turned her into a cautionary tale practically overnight.
Every Disney movie is about a woman waiting for a man, okay? Sleeping Beauty, she is comatose until a man comes to kiss her and wake her up. Rapunzel, she's up in a tower, taking biotin, hair vitamins, waiting for a man. This is what these women are
Cinderella.
doing. Is it the best? Yes, Cinderella. Is this the best message to send to young girls? No, but you don't have to rewrite and rework the classics. Come up with something new, you guys.
And this wasn't just about one movie flopping. No, this whole disaster cracked open a much larger conversation about where Hollywood is headed. The rise of streaming has shaken up everything. Pay structures, fan engagement. The very way movies succeed or fail now has changed forever. And for Disney, that's more than just an artistic failure. It's a business disaster.
This movie's cost them $200 million and counting. And instead of America being excited to take their families, I've got kids, we'd normally be excited to go see the remake of Bashful, Doc, Dopey, Grumpy, Happy, Sleepy, and Sneezy. Disney is looking at another woke flop with magical creatures instead of dwarves in a movie about 7 dwarves.
Every Disney film is supposed to be a machine. It's not just a movie, it's a merch line, a theme park ride, a global franchise. But when the movie doesn't land, that whole empire takes a hit. Suddenly, it's not about maximizing success. It's about containing the fallout. Yes, a streaming bump might happen, but the initial audience response is what really matters. And when that response is brutal, recovery is nearly impossible, especially when your lead actress becomes part of the problem. Rachel Zegler's constant presence on social media added fuel to the fire. In the old Hollywood days, stars were mysterious, distant, and handled by entire PR teams. But now, one tweet, one TikTok, one offhand comment, and boom, you're trending, and not in a good way. Audiences want realness, but there's a thin line between being relatable and being reckless. And Zegler's unfiltered takes made things worse. Every new quote only deepened the narrative that she was disconnected, defiant, or just plain dismissive. Meanwhile, the digital gossip world exploded. YouTubers, TikTokers, Reddit threads. The takes were endless. Every little moment got dissected, reshared, reinterpreted. And the truth, whatever it was, got lost in the noise.
She told Variety that I'm only responsible for what I feel, and then I'm responsible for how I act upon it, which makes no sense at all.
Snow White went from being a film to a full-blown internet drama. Nobody was talking about the story anymore. It was all about how Disney and Zegler handled the backlash. And for a studio that banks on polished, family-friendly vibes, that's a PR nightmare. So now Disney finds itself at a crossroads. Live-action remakes used to feel like sure things, but after Snow White, the whole strategy is under scrutiny. Are these reboots honoring the originals, or just cash grabs dressed up as progress?
We've already covered how Rachel Zegler is a terrible choice for Snow White. Nothing about her says Snow White, and that's even leaving aside the fact that she openly detests the story, as she's said many times during this disastrous PR campaign. But Gal Gadot, who plays the Queen, the first problem is that she's the evil queen. The evil queen is supposed to be envious of Snow White's beauty, and that is just not believable. It is just not, even in a movie with magical mirrors and dwarves and all that, in a fairy tale, that strains my ability to suspend disbelief. I cannot buy that Gal Gadot is angry that she's not as beautiful as Rachel Zegler. I cannot buy that.
Bob Iger isn't new to turbulence. He pulled off the massive acquisitions of Marvel, Lucasfilm, and Pixar. But this moment, it's different. The competition is fiercer, the fans are louder, and one misstep gets amplified in real time by millions of angry voices. Even a company as mighty as Disney can get caught off guard. And Snow White proved that when you underestimate your audience's emotional connection to a classic, you pay the price. As for Rachel Zegler, her future is now a massive question mark.
Clear. I don't really care what happens with this movie. I really hope her career is pretty much over. I'd be thrilled to see that. I can't imagine. I mean, Christian, you tell me. But is she not seen as box office poison now because of all of her antics?
You know, it's kind of a mixed track record. She's still fairly young, and her West Side Story debut was not a hit, and that was a Spielberg movie, so that was kind of a surprise. But if you're a studio, if you're a director, if you're a casting director, you've got to think twice or three times before hiring her. Listen, she's talented, she's attractive, she's got skill, but there are a lot of actresses in Hollywood who bring all that to the table and are not going to absolutely sabotage your work. She was plucked out of obscurity by Steven Spielberg. All you say is thank you, Mr. Spielberg, and you keep saying that for the next 50 years.
She was once the industry's golden girl. People praised her talent, her singing voice, her screen charisma. West Side Story had shown promise, but now, all anyone's talking about is the list of roles she's been removed from. The momentum she had just a year ago, it's vanished under the weight of controversy. Of course, Hollywood loves a comeback. One hit, one breakout role, one redemption arc, and she could be back in the game. But it won't be easy. Rebuilding trust with the public and the studios takes time. And in this climate, one wrong move can seal your fate. Her boldness on fair pay and inclusion could work for her, if framed the right way. If people start seeing her as a brave voice for change, she could earn a fiercely loyal following. But if the narrative continues to frame her as tone-deaf and entitled, that perception is nearly impossible to shake. Because once Hollywood and the fans decide you're difficult, the offers dry up fast. So now we've got a perfect storm. Disney's image crisis, Bob Iger's leadership under pressure, a changing entertainment industry struggling to balance streaming, messaging, and legacy, and Rachel Zegler, a young star caught right in the middle of it all. And what's everyone calling it? The Snow White disaster. A warning shot to every studio thinking of rebooting beloved stories without considering how deeply people care. It's a case study in what happens when studios gamble on reimagining legends and forget the magic that made them legendary in the first place. Fans aren't waiting around for apologies. Many have gone back to the real Snow White, either the 1937 original or more faithful live-action versions. And that in itself is a message. We don't want your version if you don't understand the heart of the original. For Disney, this flop may force a complete reevaluation. Maybe it's time to hit pause on the endless reboots. Maybe, just maybe, it's time to return to storytelling that feels authentic, timeless, and connected to the audience's emotional core. And Rachel? If she's lucky, she'll get a second chance, but she'll have to tread carefully. Hollywood might forgive, but it never forgets. If she doesn't pivot fast and smart, she could be remembered more for the backlash than her talent. Either way, everyone's watching. The studios, the fans, the entire industry. This wasn't just a movie, it was a moment, and it's already changed the rules of the game, and so Snow White, once Disney's crown jewel, now stands as a flashing red warning sign, a lesson in what happens when magic meets marketing and loses the plot.